Hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Today we're going to be talking about stupid online videos where EV chargers are suddenly catching on fire and why it's not really a problem. We're going to be talking about how Legroom works, how car companies cheat their Legroom numbers, the Blazer EV SS, bunch of different stuff, and of course, the fact that there is a car now on sale that is old enough to drive legally in all 50 states if it was actually a human. But before we get to all of that, let's talk about our reviews because we finally have another 5-star.
Yes, thank goodness. I was out last week, but I am back, and it's great to come back to a 5-star review. Let's kick it off. This is from Alex, and it says, Alex and team...
But not this Alex.
No, different Alex. We don't have paid Alexes.
But best name ever, so...
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
It says, Alex and team have created the best automotive podcast ever. I typically watch on the YouTube channel. Love to hear it. But I recently re-listened to all of the episodes from this year on a cross-country road trip. Alex and Travis make 15 plus hours of nonstop driving go by so quickly with such great information, non-biased perspectives, and lighthearted commentary along the way. Unfortunate that Alex's kids will never get goldfish in the car. I agree with that. That helped my trip go by easier too, even if I'll be finding them between seat rails for years. Thanks for all the great content on the podcast and YouTube channels.
Wow. Can you imagine listening to us for 15 hours straight? That sounds frightening.
I absolutely cannot. I can't.
Yeah. Woo.
But I'm so glad it worked for you, Alex. We're here for you.
That is a braver Alex than I am. I will say I was recently visiting some friends, one of whom is not on the anti-goldfish bandwagon. And let's just say there was a temper tantrum on the way about snacks in the car, and there was definitely a bit of programming there. You know, we're in the car. I need snacks. Not ideal in my book. And then, of course, there was the graveyard snack on the floor. So, yeah.
It's just a reality of things. It's just if you get a pet, you're gonna get pet hair. If you have a kid, you're gonna have messes. The car is not some weird sanctuary.
Are we attempting to make a corollary between my child and a pet?
I'm saying there are things that you accept in this world that come with consequences, both positive and negative.
Because, I mean, still to this day, every morning I pick my cat up and I turn her upside down, rub her on her little tummy, and I go, "You're dead to me because I have a real baby."
Yes.
Does that make me a bad person? Probably.
Yep.
But I'm embracing it, so it's okay.
Thank goodness our reviews are not based on the quality of people we are, but the podcasts we are producing.
Yes. But let's talk about other stupid things. Did you see this video and the report that I sent you on EVSEs and hacking and how you can magically somehow turn them into fireballs that will burn down your house?
You know, I honestly didn't read the whole thing, but I have read a lot of garbage around EVs and EVSEs. And let's talk about it for a second. Can your EVSE or your charger, right, the charger at home or at the office, can it catch fire? Yes, it can. Just like any other electronic in your house. But it's a lot closer to your dryer than it is some, crazy transformer situation. And how often do dryers just randomly catch fire unless there is a underlying issue or a negligence concern, right? Are you trying to plug something in that draws way too much power for the outlet that it's actually designed for? Are you hacking? But by hacking, I mean, are you splicing some things out and making two different outlets when there should only be one? It's just not a huge concern. And if you are concerned, always have a professional install it. That's what I did.
Yep. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that dryer vent fire is much more common than EVSE fires. But the origin of this is there was a hacking conference. They're talking about what is required to hack into an EVSE and what can you get them to do. And for those that are not familiar, an EVSE is the thing that's commonly called a charger. It's not really a charger because the charger is inside your vehicle. The EVSE is on your wall, and it's the one that tells the vehicle, "Hey, I'm here," approves the connection, provides ground fault interruption, and basically just tells the car what kind of power is available, what it can do. And that's the origin story of this. They're claiming that it's possible to hack the EVSE and then for the EVSE to supply more power than it should to your devices. Well, there are a few problems with the stupid thing that they were doing here. It's clear in the video that they are talking about a 48 amp EVSE, the specific one that was in the video that we were linked to. And you can tell that it's a 48 amp one because it actually has a plug. And all the higher output EVSEs are hardwired. So like 48 amps is the most you can do with a plug. I still wouldn't recommend it.
I said even
32
that one
amps.
is really high for a
Yeah.
plug.
32 amps is usually the highest you would want to do with a plug, and you want to make sure you have the exact right plug. You want an L1460 plug, not the 50 amp varieties, because remember we overrate the circuit requirements in the US by 20%. So a 48 amp EVSE is on a 60 amp breaker, and everything should be appropriate for 60 amps in this
Mhm.
situation. At any rate, so we see that in this photo. And then we see that they have connected it to a whole bunch of heaters, apparently. So they've used heaters, not a car, to try and
Mhm.
be the load. And they've cranked that load up to 81 amps, which is, way above 48.
Way above, yep.
Way
Yep.
above 48. They've got the 40-foot cable coiled in a nice little tight little coil on the
Mhm.
wall for
So it gets
whatever
real
reason.
nice and warm.
Yeah, and then and only 12 inches of cable is on either end of this coil. So lots of things going wrong here. First one is,
Mhm.
so everybody knows here, as long as your EVSE is installed properly by a licensed electrician professionally, this would have been on a 60 amp circuit. The breaker would have tripped in less than a minute. So
Mhm.
most breakers are inverse time breakers. So the greater the load, the greater the overload, the faster they will trip. And in a situation like this, where your 60 amp circuit designed for a 48 amp continuous load, keep that in mind again. So a 60 amp circuit is designed for a 48 amp continuous load, but rated for 60. If you hit 60, eventually it will trip, like 60.5 amps. It's going to
Mhm.
trip eventually. It's going to take a while. And that's meant for startup loads like air conditioning motors and things like that to do their thing. 80 amps, though, continuous, it's going to trip in about a minute or less, considerably less for some breakers as well.
Yeah.
So this wouldn't happen. So somehow you have to have magically overrated your breaker. You have plugged in an EV. You have then convinced the charger to tell the EV to charge at over 80 amps. Oh, and then you have magically found an EV to charge at 80 amps, which
Mhm.
is really rare.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the big thing, right? Is that if you look at how much I'd say just a standard EV can charge at, it's basically 48 amps, right? That's about
Hmm.
11 and a half kilowatts, and that's where most of them float around. So what magical EV is this? Because there are some for sure that can
Hmm.
charge up to 19 and change kilowatts, but my Tesla out here, you could try and crank it up all you want, but it's going to top out at basically 40 amps, and
Yep.
that's it. You're gonna have a hard time overloading that one.
And I'm just don't know who parks their EV inches away from their EVSE and somehow manages to make this little tight connection work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. What if and can we? And I have no doubt that yes, a lot of these EVSEs are smart EVSEs. So if you got onto the Wi-Fi network, there's a way you could work your way into this system. Okay, now you can go ahead and access some of the data. Can you manipulate the data? Those
Hmm.
sorts of things. Like, sure, there's ifs and maybes and whens, and then the question is, in what world is someone going to try and burn your house down with something
Yeah.
like this, if and when and however. So, I'm not going to say like, oh, there's no relevance to this at all. It's like, okay, well, here's a
Right.
thing that could happen, but let's talk about the theoretical and how we got to this moment.
This is not a never, right? It's like
Right.
I could be driving home and I could have a meteorite strike my car and kill me on the freeway. It could happen.
Every day that could
Right?
happen.
Every day that could happen. Is it likely to happen? Probably more likely than this.
Yeah, but if
um,
you're in Russia and you have a dash cam, it's incredibly likely to happen. These are the things the internet has told me.
Also, you have to have an internet connected and an internet connectable EVSE to begin with, and most people do not seem to do that unless they have a Tesla home station, because Tesla's really the big one that actually has internet connectivity for
Mhm.
a lot of their stations. I, and I don't know why I would ever care to connect mine. I don't know. Do you actually ever look at your chargers
I
thing?
have. I have, but it's very rare, and it was sort of a hey, I'm going to connect it, and honestly, it's mostly I connected it for the job, is to
Mm-hmm,
be able
mm-hmm.
to check in and report back on the charging speeds of different things, and so if I wasn't doing this for work, I don't care what it's doing.
Yeah,
The only
because
nice
your
thing,
car knows.
so the only nice thing is that I can be notified that my power went out by my EVSE. So that's sort of an interesting,
Yeah.
workaround. Obviously, like I have a Google connected home, so it's not like I don't already have some of that. Hey, your thermostat just went out, and get some sort of notification. But yeah, my EVSE will say disconnected,
Yeah.
and if that happens, that means my power's out, or somebody stole it off the wall. But more than likely, it's the power.
Yep. So bottom line to whoever sent this in to us, because it came from an unsigned email through our website. Any rate, thanks.
Anonymous
And
source.
it's a nothing burger. I wouldn't worry about it at all. But I am worried that we have one less sedan in America. I don't know if you ever got to drive this, but the
I
G80
didn't.
electrified is dead.
I was just looking through the cars available for us to drive for the week, and I was genuinely looking for this one because I haven't spent time with it, and
Hmm, hmm.
I missed the boat,
That's
unfortunately.
okay. If you are one of the 140 people out there that have bought one, then, then reach out to us and let us know. We will review
Travis wants
your
to drive one.
electrified G80. Uh, you know, I apparently am one of the 150 people, the expanded set, that had intended to buy one coming soon because I have
Mhm,
been plotting for a while and I thought, I really like the redesigned looks of the G80 and the
mhm,
2026 model, 2025,
mhm.
whatever they're calling it in Korea.
Right,
The
right.
new one in Korea solved the two issues I had with the G80, which were range. Now it's over 300 miles of range.
Okay, excellent.
The battery capacity grew because
Mhm.
previously the battery was a little small, and the body gained 5.1 inches, 5.5 inches, something like that.
Be a
Almost
great
all of
family
that, yeah, almost all of it went to the rear seats. And exactly, I was like, oh my God, we could all fit in this car.
car.
Two
Mhm,
kids in rear facing child seats,
mhm,
two taller people up front. This
mhm.
would be fantastic. We would actually be able to go back to an efficient, comfy, cool looking
Sedan.
sedan that looked nice, has its charge door in the
Mhm,
primo spot, mwah, right there up front where it belongs.
mhm.
But no, the
No.
interwebs have told us no, and Genesis killed it.
It's one of those things, and I try not to harp on it, but you vote with your dollars, right?
Hmm.
And you and I are not in positions where we can go buy new cars every year, even though we are uniquely plugged into this world and go, oh, I really like this. There are a number of cars that you and I talk about that go, I really like this, but if I really like it and it's sort of a niche product, the only way it's going to survive is if I go buy one.
Yep.
And unfortunately, not that I don't like the concept, because I do. I actually much prefer a sedan over another crossover just about any day of the week at this point. But it had limitations, and there were too many of them. And as good
Yeah.
looking as it was, and based on all accounts, how well it drove and all the good qualities that it had, you could also just get that in the SUV crossover version and have less compromises. And that's a tough spot to be in.
And that's it. So, we're going to see far fewer sedans in 2026 model year than 2025 because of customer demand and, of course, tariffs, because a lot of the sedans, the slower selling sedans that we are still seeing here in the US, not made in the US. And this is a tariff related issue. It's a lot
Mhm.
easier for expensive sedans. Part of why I'm surprised that it didn't continue in a way, because it would have been a more expensive option. So,
Right.
easier for Genesis to absorb a high tariff than Nissan on a Versa, right? Like Versa, we
Mhm.
all know is dead because that's just not going to work. It's no way you could move
Keep it
production to the United
affordable.
States, yeah, and have enough of it built here to make that make sense. So
Because we
that's,
don't buy them in volume.
yeah,
That's
that's a
the
bummer. So I
yeah.
guess my future's got to be like a, I don't know, a Chevy Blazer or something like that.
Mm.
Uh, it's roomy inside, which leads us to the Blazer EV SS.
Yeah. Now, Alex, you said you want to talk about this, and I went, now hold on a second. I think I've talked about this before, but I suspect you have driven one recently.
I just had one last week, but let's go. What was your impression when you got behind the wheel of the EVSS? What historic corollary might you have considered?
So the thing that came to me, and gosh, I don't remember if I mentioned it in the review or not, was that this felt like, I mean, so let's start with the SS, right? The
Hmm,
SS
hmm.
branding is something that means super sport. That's the Chevy, official documentation, and it's been put on historically muscle cars, but then it's branched out a little bit. So it's
Hmm.
made its way to trucks. There's a couple Silverado SSs. I believe there was like a Trailblazer SS at one point.
There
Um,
was
and that was a full size SUV Trailblazer, not the little baby
midsize,
thing we have now.
midsize,
Midsize, excuse me,
midsize.
but much larger than we have these days in the Trailblazer. And now it's made its way over to the Blazer EV. So the first time it's made its way onto an electric vehicle. And honestly, it just feels so much like American muscle, the
Hmm.
new age American muscle. Because something like a Chevelle SS is not a sports car. Super sport, I don't know what sport we're playing, right? But that's going to be like rugby, maybe. We're talking, it's brutish. Here's all the power. Here's all the okay, but where's the handling? Well, it's better at handling, but is it good? Well, it's better. Like these are the things. Is it lighter? No, 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 no. Just more powerful. And that's what the Blazer
Mhm.
EV SS is, but not in a bad way. I really enjoyed it, and talk about a bargain. I mean,
Yeah.
truly a bargain. The size of the vehicle, the relative comfort, the good looks. I mean, subjective, but I think it's pretty good looking,
Yeah,
especially on the SS,
I think it's
and
okay
and the
looking.
power, for the price tag.
There is I am of two minds on this, and
Okay.
I'll try and dissect this, but I'm glad you went American Muscle because for the viewers, we did not practice this at all because no one's had time. Travis has been
We
deathly
never
ill for
practice this.
Travis has been deathly ill for almost 2 weeks. There were daily
Yeah.
wellness checks just to make sure he was, still kicking,
Lots
is
of
he
thumb up
breathing?
emojis were sent. Like,
We're like,
I'm
"Can
great.
you come to the window and just put a mirror under your nose so we can make sure you're not just an animated not Weekend at Bernie's going on there?"
Right, right, right.
At any rate, so because that I made corollaries to a vehicle that I think is going to cause certain people like my brother to probably want to burn effigies of me. It strikes me like a Pontiac Grand National somehow, kind
Okay.
of still American muscle car, but kind of that whole like we put power in what? Like we took a
Yeah.
sorry, Buick Grand National. Mike, I don't
Oh,
know
yeah, yeah.
where Pontiac came from.
Pontiac.
Buick.
Yeah, okay.
Like we
And I
took a
missed it, so
Regal. Yeah, like we took a Regal and we did what with it?
right.
It's that sort of thing because it's not light. I was
Mhm,
shocked. I assumed it was about the same curb weight as my Durango SRT. It is 400 pounds heavier than a
mhm.
Durango with a 6.4 liter V8, and it's
Which is
ro-
not a lightweight.
no, and it's rolling on smaller tires.
Mm, okay.
Yeah,
How much smaller?
20 millimeters. That's notably
That's
smaller. I was
significant. That is
surprised. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That is perhaps the thing that I was surprised about was that they leaned so hard into this more muscle wagon.
Mhm.
If you had told me 20 years ago that Dodge was going to have an EV, I kind of thought it would have been like an electric, wagon because
Okay.
they had
The Magnum.
the Magnum,
Mhm.
and this is kind of that somehow in my mind. It's
No, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, yeah.
kind of that thing, right? Um, doesn't handle only the Magnum actually handled better. The 275 with tires and like a cupcake shy of 6,000 pounds when you actually put people in it.
Mhm.
It's a lot, but it's comfy.
It is. And, I'm trying to remember. I don't believe it has an adaptive suspension,
Does
right?
not. I
Okay.
think
And
yeah.
that's kind of that's the thing that's missing, I think, at that point is if you could dial it up or down and really change the driving personas, right? So that it
Would that have
wasn't.
been worth 2 grand?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
so too.
2 grand.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, I don't know, and I got a chance to, and actually I had this conversation the other day because I was behind a Blazer EV, and I said, "Oh, I've driven one of those," and my passenger said, "Are they good?" And I said, "Well, the SS is fun, and I got to drive it on track, and I got to
Mhm.
drive the Lyric V on track, or track-ish autocross, and they're the same thing. Don't tell anyone I said that. They're the same thing." Um, and it was fun. I mean, it was a drop of a hat. Here we go, worth a giggle and a smile.
Mhm.
And then if you really started pushing it, you could end up in trouble. That's actually the funniest thing about the software is when you turn it into the competitive, performance mode software. It is actually dialing back some of that power because that
Mhm.
thing understeers like a snowplow. And they have to dial that out because you're not going to have a lot of fun if you are really trying to push that.
Now here's the other question. Is an Ioniq 5N worth 4 grand more? I would also say yes to that one.
Yes.
It is a shocking amount lighter.
But such a different machine. And that's the thing.
Mhm.
There are going to be way more compromises in your day to day living with an Ionic
Mhm.
5N than it is for a Blazer EV SS. If
Yeah.
I was picking between those two and it's my money and whatever, I'm going Ioniq 5N. But I would not fault anyone for going with the Blazer because it's going to be more space, more comfortable, easier
Longer
cruising.
range too,
Yep, yep.
but slower charging.
Yeah, here's the thing. I just drove from my house to Seattle and back. I had to stop for 3 minutes to charge to make sure I got
Hmm.
home.
Hmm.
That it pretty manageable. That's it ended up being
Hmm.
about 6 or 7 hours on the road, the traffic and slowdowns and whatnot. But it's I don't think charging's the issue people think it is.
No, it's not too bad. The Blazer's interesting because, and this is where the side diversion here, the long legroom topic needs to, I guess, get inserted here because,
Sure,
and we'll remind me to circle back to Blazer because I have a few thoughts on there that occurred
I
to
will
me
try.
today. Because Way is driving me batty yesterday. At any rate, for those that don't know, we have a base model of the Blazer EV for one more year.
Hmm.
Um, Legroom is interesting because I talked to someone recently and they were asking, they were like, well, is the Blazer worth it? I have a Model Y. And I was like, well, they're not the same thing. The Blazer's a lot bigger. And they're like, oh, no, the legroom charts. My Model Y is super roomy. It's so big inside. And I'm like, you have not been in a Blazer then. It's like a rolling living room in comparison.
Hmm.
And this led me to really dive into legroom here, where we should probably boring warning. If you don't like the
Yeah,
details, just skip
we're
ahead
gonna
in
put
the
on
video.
the lab coat and the
Yeah.
specs and a little hat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. But
the
one
lab.
of the reasons we always talk about legroom here, and the way that we talk about legroom on Auto Buyer's Guide, is different than a lot of new car outlets talk about legroom for a very important reason, because front seats move. I
Mm.
haven't been in a vehicle in a long time where the front seat was fixed. Have you?
No, it's been a while, and it was a
Yeah.
U-Haul.
Yeah. And fun fact, a lot of second rows move. And if you have a select number of new three-row SUVs, the third row gets to move too. So
Yes, they do.
legroom really depends on where you have these seats set. And your experience will depend as a rear seat passenger on where that front seat is set. So that's why it's important to talk about them together and their relationship to one another. Now, how is legroom measured? First off, foundational point here. In the US, generally speaking, but not required, we have an SAE standard. So it's the J1100 standard for interior measurements. Big disclaimer, tons of different versions. It's been revised a bonkers number of times since the 1960s. And guess what? Nobody uses the same standard that we have been able to divine.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of companies don't know, or their PR people don't know how to ask, or they just won't say which version they reuse, mind you. But at any rate, so how this standard works is they measure legroom from your hip point, which is the theoretical place where your hip hinges. Well,
Hmm.
would hinge if you were a 5'9", 170-pound male.
Hmm.
That was the 50th percentile male when the standard was created, mind you.
And
So,
ironically, neither of us fit that category. So
no.
go on.
So they measure you from that magic point where your theoretical hip hinge point would be,
Hmm.
down to where your ankle hinges, not the tip of your foot, to where your ankle hinges, not the bottom of your foot or the
Right.
bottom of your shoe,
Ankle
to where
hinge.
your ankle is, in a straight line, right through the seat.
Hmm.
Then they add 10 inches to accommodate your leg actually extending, because again, we're talking about a 5'9" male dummy, right?
Hmm.
So that is how front legroom is measured, and your foot is on the accelerator pedal. Now, what is weird is normally the foot is just resting on the accelerator pedal, but it doesn't have to be. There are
Hmm.
some exceptions that allow the accelerator to be completely pressed for
Hmm.
reasons that make no sense in this standard. Front passenger room doesn't matter. They don't give a crap. That's not measured on that side. So, in case you're wondering why you're in a vehicle and then you hop on the other side and it feels weird or small or whatever, that's why
Because it
that's
doesn't matter for the chart.
not measured in the chart, right?
Hmm.
Now, here's where the important part comes. A very similar process happens in the rear seat. And this is where some of the dummy dimensions are important. Guess what shoe size this dummy is wearing?
For second row, I'm assuming the assumption is
Oh
for
no, all the
smaller.
rows.
Oh.
Same dummy being used for this measurement.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine what's a 5'9" guy. Again, not a 5'9" guy, but what do they wear? Do they wear like eights, nines?
7.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's small.
A US 7 shoe, and not a big trainer with a big roomy toe or anything like that. Because again,
Mhm.
the standard 1960s. They're talking about a standard, averagey men's leathery kind of shoe from the
A little
1960s,
loafer
size
situation.
7, right? So that is what the dummy is wearing, and you basically get to put your foot. The dummy gets to put their foot flat in the footwell someplace before it hits an obstruction, which is why you
Mhm.
do see some of those weird carved out areas in the rear seats for shoe room, because that's
Mhm.
kind of where the dummy has to go. It's not right back at the back of that footwell, which is good
Mhm.
because some vehicles have a really awkwardly shaped footwell. Any rate, same thing. Hip point
There's a
down
magic
to the
point.
ankle point plus 10 inches.
Okay.
But this is where some vehicles may actually start diverging from one another, even though in reality they feel roomier or less roomy than others, because
Mhm.
if your knees up in the air, that distance is going to be shorter. But
Like
as
a lot of
long as you
EVs.
right, but as long as you can actually have your knees up in your chest and you don't mind it, it can feel roomier than those numbers would otherwise indicate, right?
Yes.
Or if the rear seats are very upright, like an old Kia
Mhm.
Soul or a
Mhm.
Honda Element, where those numbers seemed small, but they were really roomy. Because
Mhm.
if you're actually sitting like I am in this chair here with
Mhm.
your knees at a 90-degree angle, that's comfortable, but your knee and your hip are actually, or your ankle and your hip are actually quite close together. So you can get
Right.
a kind of a smaller number in some of those situations. So that's the part to remember there. The last part is the fiddling of the numbers part, where I would say cheating. Let's just call a spade, number cheating.
Mhm.
So, and Ford has classically been the American car company that has cheated the most with their legroom figures. And here's how they do it. The SAE standard does not say, there's a lot of variation here, that does not say what position seats need to be in for the measurements that manufacturers choose to advertise, right?
Mhm.
So no one wants a tiny front seat
No.
number because we're not 5'9" anymore, right? Everybody wants
Right.
40 plus inches of front legroom. So they measure this as if the seat was all the way back in its tracks.
Okay.
So they measure this 100% rearward, hip point to ankle point plus 10 inches. You get this 40, 42, whatever, inch front seat measurement that we see a lot in new vehicles. Well, they don't, by and large, Ford doesn't, leave the seat in that position for the second row measurement. Whereas some
Because then
car
it'd be
companies,
smaller.
right, some car companies do. And this is where we see, for instance, RAV4 that on paper has about four something inches less legroom than than a Ford Escape, and that's just not true. If you've ever been in them, you'll know that
Mhm.
Escape is pretty tight, arguably tighter than a RAV4. I would venture to say at most identical, but
Mhm.
most likely smaller. But on paper, it looks roomy. And that's kind of what's going on with Blazer EV versus Model Y. We don't know exactly where Tesla is placing the front seat for the Model Y measurement,
Mhm.
but we can be sure with the Blazer that rear seat measure is probably with the front seat either at that 50th percentile position or somewhere thereabouts. And then also for the rear seat measure, because the rear seats are huge. And on paper, they look similar. In reality, they're really
Great.
not.
Now, one thing I will say that does kind of drive me crazy, and part of it's just my own dimensions. So I'm 6 feet tall, but I've got like a 31-inch inseam. I am mostly torso, and I end up sitting pretty tall. You can attribute that to whatever you want to. The point is, I run out of headroom
Mm-hmm.
way before I run out of leg room. Like I'm not a small person, but when we have a ton of leg room and I still have to do this, it is one of the most infuriating things in the world. They go, make the whole thing smaller. Nobody back here who is in the ceiling is also needing this much leg. I mean, you don't build cars for a 10th percentile person, up or
Ah,
down, right?
but we build them for child seats, so you don't need headroom.
Yeah, but how much extra room do you need for those child seats? Although you're the guy to answer that question, and they are getting bigger all the time because
Yeah.
so
A
too are the
surprising
children who are
amount.
sitting in them. Yes.
Let's put it this way, a surprising amount. If you're a 6 foot tall person up front and you want the child seat to be behind you,
Mhm.
then you really need to find a rear-facing child seat, I should say specifically, especially if you want your child to sit rear-facing in an infant seat, in a rear-facing toddler seat, and you plan on doing extended rear-facing, like some people want to do over 50 pounds, up to 60 something pounds. If you want to do that, really
Mhm.
extend out that rear-facing because it is, according to most physicians and testing, it is the safest position for your young children to be in. Then you need at least 80 inches of true combined legroom in order to make that happen. In
Yeah.
most formats of vehicle, you need about 29 inches from the front seat back area to where that child seat would interact with the rear seat back. It's a pretty firm measurement in every vehicle. And that's one of
Yeah.
the easy things to do is if you're out there hunting for cars and you don't want to have the fuss of bringing your kids with you, which I strongly recommend, though, actually stick them in the vehicle. If you
Round
don't want to
one,
do
do it
that,
by yourself. Round two, when you're narrowing it down,
mhm,
bring the kids.
but if you don't want to do that, what you can easily do is adjust the seat for yourself, the front seat, and then use a tape measure, measure 11 inches from the seat bottom cushion up the seat back, and then from that point to the closest part of the front seat. And if you have about 29 inches, you're pretty good for most infant and convertible seats in that seat. But there are a few variations here and there, and that's where some of these standards and the way they get measured is tricky. And also just remember, actually go and sit in these vehicles. It's one thing to see the measurements here, and we're going to be going in the future. We're going to be trying to do some different styles of measurements in vehicles that we're looking at to try and get a truer picture of the space in the vehicle. We're gonna, I don't know, cook up some name for that because I don't want to
Yeah, we'll figure
confuse it
something out.
with I don't want to confuse it with legroom. We maybe we'll call it the true legroom figure or something like that,
Mhm.
because the way that this is calculated is just weird. So, they aren't really following technically the trajectory from hip to knee to ankle. They're approximating that with this 10-inch measure, but the way you fold and contort yourself in the seat is important.
Mhm.
It's just as infuriating as cargo measurements. There's very little standardization on cargo measurements here. The SAE, for instance, has two different measurement methods for a sedan and a hatchback.
Mhm.
Why? I don't know. The European measurement system, typically the VDA over there, that is measured in a completely different way. Also, more similar to what we find in the sedan category in the US,
Mhm.
which is why you'll look at a Volvo XC60 and you'll compare it to, I don't know, a RAV4, and you'll think to yourself, well, on paper, these cargo areas are vastly different in size, but in reality, they're not too far off. I mean, the RAV4 is still pretty darn practical for a size vehicle, but the XC60 is not too far off just because of the way that they're measuring these. And by and large, the reality that European car companies don't bother adjusting them. They don't remeasure it based on the American standard. They just convert to cubic
It's
feet and
extra
go,
costs. Yeah.
there you go. That's it.
And the
Um,
other thing is, it just really depends on what it is you're moving.
mhm.
That's the other thing. We have a couple different tests, and actually, I think we might be getting together in the next couple weeks, and you might need to send me home with some luggage because our 24-inch roller bag test is hard to do when I don't have a bunch of 24-inch roller bags. But we'll talk about that at a
This is
later
true.
time. Yeah,
This is true. But
but if you
that's why
never
we are now
travel,
measuring cargo areas. So
right,
we're
but
going to be
if you
including
don't
those measurements.
travel, that tells you something, but is it useful to you, right?
Right.
And actually,
Exactly.
the other thing that we've talked about is even just how differently you and I sit in the space.
Mhm.
We're basically the same height, but we're different dimensions. We set up our driver's seats very differently. So
Mhm.
when I say I have tons of room, and you say, "Yeah, it doesn't feel like I have the space," that's another one I kind of want to see. Is we'll set up a measurement tool that says, "Oh yeah, sitting in this
Mhm.
seat, this is
Mhm.
how much extra room Travis has or Alex has," and so we can help people get some of those measurements because that's the whole point of our testing is consistency. You can watch our video on
Mhm.
vehicle A and vehicle B and see us in the same space, and then you can get some more useful information. That's the idea.
Yep, and we may have some videos coming up where we're going to explore different measurement methods, and we'll talk about, see if we can get viewer feedback on what measurement methods might work for everybody.
Yeah.
But just before we move on, and hopefully back to Blazer, if we can
Back to
still
Blazer
remember that,
EV. Yep. Yep.
is the reason that European hatches often have smaller cargo area measurements is that the VDA, the European standard that's used there, it does not include cargo space above the rear seat back, whereas the
Right.
whereas the SAE method does. The SAE method is a calculated one. It's simply the volume of the space, the maximum extent that this can be, even
Yep.
if it's not useful space. So nooks and
Or
crannies and
safe.
strange spaces, all of that's included.
Mhm.
Whereas in the sedan SAE test, it's how many of these standardized box shapes can you stuff in the trunk. So that's the
Mhm.
origin of the differences between these standards and these vehicles. In the European test, nothing above that rear seat counts. So you look at an X5 and you say, "Gosh, why is that cargo area so strangely small?" Versus a Lexus RX, which actually does have kind of a compromised cargo area, but they
Mhm.
look almost equal on paper. That's because BMW has one hand tied behind their back by their choice, mind you,
Mhm.
where they have chosen not to include a third of the cargo area that would have been measured if they were measuring it the same way that Lexus and Lincoln and Cadillac are measuring.
And I just finished up with a Lexus GX, and I had the Overtrail model, which is the 5 seat only. And as we
Mm-hmm.
run through these numbers, as we review them, there's a lot of numbers to remember there because there's multiple seat configurations, and depending on which one and which seats are folded, that's kind of the most cargo numbers I've had to look at in a little while.
Yeah. So back to Blazer.
Yes,
I am I am so offended somehow by the Blazer. I mean, air my grievances.
please.
Um,
I'm curious.
because it is so close to being perfect. The
Hmm.
price tag is right because it's
Hmm.
crazy cheap. Uh,
Yeah.
it is built with American labor, with
Hmm.
American sourced materials to justify a lot of the concerns that some people have with EVs, right? So it's
Hmm.
like, well, no, this EV did create American labor, it created American jobs. It's built with American supply sourcing, et cetera, to meet all the government requirements, et cetera. It's
Hmm.
big inside, it's comfy, et cetera. But that infotainment system, it looks good, but oh my God, I am so, uh, it's just, it's so infuriatingly frustrating. And then that GM goes out and says, "Hey, Australia, guess what? You get to have all of our EVs with smartphone projection."
Hmm. But so here's the reality. The answer to your question of, is it all worth it or is this close to perfect? What you really want is a Lyric because you can get the Lyric V, which is the same sort of powertrain you get in the Blazer EV SS. And I am only slightly hesitant. I believe that one has an adaptive suspension on it, and you also get CarPlay and Android Auto
For the moment, because
for the moment.
GM has said that Lyric will be losing CarPlay. They haven't said exactly when, but we know
Mhm.
that it will lose CarPlay. But you have to give up the big screen because Lyric uses the older version of Cadillac's
You
systems
have to
there.
give
So the
up the
screens have,
enormous screen. It's still pretty
yeah,
big.
yes,
But
but
you
it's
don't
not as
get
big.
the J3400. You'll still get
Hmm.
the CCS.
Which you still get on Blazer. So Blazer hasn't
Yes.
moved yet. So still CCS there. I think that's totally fine. I don't honestly care. You're gonna be using an adapter for the rest of your life anyway. But the seats aren't as comfortable in the Lyric. They're a little oddly
Mhm.
shaped, and the price tag is much higher in the
It
Lyric.
is. It is.
So it's a tricky sell there.
I think it's
Those
better looking though, and you do get that adaptive suspension, assuming I'm not talking sideways there. But
it is a little better looking. I just don't know if the price tag is worth it. I mean, you could Blazer SS for the price of a lightly equipped Lyric. That's
yeah,
the tricky one. It's the lack of customer choice that really offends me though here. This is GM's decision to say, "No, sorry, you don't deserve CarPlay or Android Auto." And it's not a sincerely held belief, seemingly like at least you could explain away with Tesla and Rivian, where they're like, "Nope, we don't believe it. We made our cars, we have no
completely
provision for
without
it."
it. We haven't done any of this work. We are not going to
Right.
do any of this work. Yep.
Not going to do it again. None of our cars have ever had it. We don't care. Whatever. But for GM, who was one of the first car companies to adopt it, offers it in literally everything else in their lineup,
Everything. Yeah.
and and has the all the hardware and software to do it on board every single one that is sold now.
Flip the switch.
That is what offends me. And then to prove the point, because some people had argued, well, maybe they don't really. Well, look at Australia. Also, look at the jailbreaking that can happen with Blazer that GM really tried to shut down quick.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, your solution was aftermarket,
Hmm.
and it works, but you don't love it.
No, and the and the Waze thing. So the one PR person who was incidentally, mind you, not a GM employee.
Mhm.
Uh, don't want to throw them under the bus for upper management's silly decisions because they're just like we just don't want to talk about it. But one of the other manufacturers' PR person was like, "Well, you could just use Waze. It has the Google store. You could just use Waze. I don't know why you'd care."
Mhm.
Well, Waze is truly terrible in that system. I don't know if you've tried it. Like,
I haven't, no.
oh my god, bad. The voice commands don't work well. You can't keyboard type unless you're stopped.
Right, which is
The
so inconvenient.
the latest thing though is that whether the headlights are on or off, the colors in Waze are constantly
Oh,
flickering back and forth between different
dark
colors
mode and
now.
light mode or whatever.
So the app is just effed up, seriously effed up. It's not night mode. It's like literally on a 50 hertz flicker. The line the car's going on is flickering between maroon and green, and then the background is going from light pink to light purple, like constantly flickering as you're moving. It is
Well, that's not distracting or anything, right?
the most annoying thing I have ever seen in my life. And I don't know what software update broke this, but it didn't do that when we first got the car and put Waze
Right.
on it, but it
But
certainly
it
does
does
now.
now. Hmm.
And this is the problem, I would say, the core problem with this thought process where it's like, oh, it's a smartphone on wheels. You can download apps to it. Well, how well does this work if you had a low volume Google tablet, Google Android based tablet? It's the
Mhm.
exact same problem.
That also came in interesting dimensions, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
all of these screens running Android Automotive are different dimensions, different resolutions, different
Mm-hmm.
touch inputs. It's a lot of variability that people don't want to deal with. That's why people like
Yeah.
Apple and got away from regular computers because
Mm-hmm.
Apple controlled every piece of the process where,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft operating system, well, it doesn't work on my computer. Well,
Yep.
is it Microsoft's problem or the computer's problem? I don't know.
But before we dive into that part, let me just say this is not a pro Apple comment because this applies
No,
equally to
yeah.
Android Auto. And here's the core thing. Like, if you have a Google smartphone, like a Google branded smartphone,
Yeah.
Google's made tons of them, right?
Hmm.
I mean, model goes on sale. They sell hundreds of thousands the first second that it goes
Yeah.
on sale, right? How many Blazers has Chevy sold? Not a lot compared to that, right?
Hmm.
So if you're a software developer and you're going to update Waze, you're going to
You're going to
update the
focus on the volume
yeah,
product.
you're going to update that Android Auto interface right away. And
Yes.
since it's all running on that same smartphone, you've only got that one to deal with. Yes, they're
Mhm.
different sizes of display for Android Auto, but they've made that a lot easier. And the corollary here is not Android Auto. This is tablet. So this is like,
Correct.
oh, I have a 5-year-old Samsung tablet. Well, how many apps that you really want to use that your friend has said work so well on their Android phone, even,
Hmm.
how many of those are going to work on your Android tablet from 5 years ago? Probably not very many.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to be the transition you think it is.
Hmm. And that's the core problem with onboard vehicle apps. I think it's fantastic that they've integrated Google in there for mapping, for voice command, for all those basic core features in the Google suite of things.
Hmm.
But the moment you start saying, oh, you could just download an app for that, that's where things go a little off.
Yeah, and I think one of the other selling points, especially on these vehicles with big screens, is things. Oh, you can do other things now with these apps. You can do the Nitro Asphalt 2 is
Hmm.
highlighted in a couple of these vehicles, and you go, yeah, great. My kids who have tablets can put their tablets down and pull out a controller from the center console in the vehicle and start gaming while we're on our way to soccer practice. That's a point where you're doing too much. That's
Yeah.
really feels like we're doing too much there.
The only logic I could see there, and this is a real stretch,
Hmm.
is if you're the kind of parent that says, I want to limit screen time, but you also, but then you have to be this other kind of narrow,
Hmm.
even narrower group where you're like, I want to limit screen time, except in the car.
But I'm going to limit screen time, but I'm going to utilize it to my advantage so that they are off of
Yes.
my
Right.
ass
Because
more
because if
often than
you
not.
Because if you said you can only have screen time in the car and you had an iPad, well, then it's mommy, daddy, where's my iPad? Why can't I just use it here just for a little bit, just for I'm almost
Mhm,
done. Can I take it with me? That kind of thing. How many
mhm.
people are really going to be hardcore about no iPad only is in the car, stays in the car, right? Well, if it's
Yeah,
part of the car, then it doesn't go with you. There's
right.
that, I guess, elegance in a way, but I just don't know why I would want that. I think I
No,
would just I haven't gotten there yet, it's too young. I think I would just go either with hardcore no or give in and just like, here's a tablet, take it with you.
right. And that's it's a small one here, but it was a luxury vehicle. I don't remember which one, but we got a comment that said, "I can't believe there's no infotainment screens in the back." And I go, "Man, they're called iPads. They're called
Mhm.
tablets. Why in the world would you pay $2,200 to get a feature in your vehicle that doesn't work nearly as well as this tablet? I have two kids.
Mhm.
Great, two tablets, same
Yep.
cost. They can do their homework on them. You can take them away when you want to, but
Yeah.
they can exist in the car and outside the car. A lot of vehicles these days have tablet holders that it's an accessory, whatever, but it's designed specifically to go on the back of the headrest, or they've got a little slot
Mhm.
there, and here's your charging cable, and it's like now your kids don't have to fight over who's watching what. Although cooperation is a good thing to learn at some point, but it, just go get a tablet that you can do everything else for, or just give them your tablet when you're in the car.
Yeah.
The driver, aren't using it. Put it in kid mode and say, "Here's your YouTube or whatever else." Yeah,
Mhm.
that's one of the first things we can get rid of is rear entertainment systems. But
Yeah. Rear seat
but
entertainment systems, I think, are probably one of the single dumbest things that are on new car options list today. I would never do
but
it.
we've been talking about General Motors. We also compared that Blazer EV to the SS to Ioniq 5N. But there's a partnership coming up between Hyundai and General Motors.
There is, which is interesting, and it's not going to have as much of an effect on consumers if you're listening to this in the United States, mind you. But
Mhm.
GM and Hyundai have agreed to partner on 5 new vehicles, hybrids and gasoline vehicles here. A compact SUV, a mid-sized truck, a sedan, and there's also going to be a commercial electric van. The only one we're going to get in the US, though, is an electric van. So if you were hoping that this would be the start of maybe, I don't know, a Kia Tasman built in a GM factory or
Mhm.
something like that, hopes are dashed. That is not for us. That is for Central and South America.
Now, this one's kind of interesting because it shows another partnership with General Motors because they partnered with Honda, right? So we have the
Hmm.
Prologue and we have the ZDX. But Honda did it in a way where they said, "Hey, we are, let's just say, slow on the up. We'd like to
Hmm.
partner and get things going." But both Hyundai and General Motors have been on the drop from go. They've kind of gone different directions with their ideologies, but neither of them are really struggling. So this is sort of a lean on different strengths to continue to get
Hmm.
stronger versus a someone struggling and really needs an extra hand. At least that's my read on it.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. This is focusing on a partnership in the style that I think would be useful for the United States and is sad that we're not getting here because it's a focus on making vehicles less expensive.
Mhm.
So this is going to be hopefully not a badge engineering job and hopefully more similar to, for instance, what we see in some of the Geely portfolio companies with Volvo and Geely and Polestar, et cetera, maybe a little bit less than the Volvo Polestar alliance, but where they're co-developing some components for these vehicles and general platforms, and then each company is going to style and deal with the rest of that part themselves. The corollary is maybe what we saw in the Global Engine Alliance. So Chrysler, the Daimler Chrysler Company, Mitsubishi, and Hyundai had a global engine alliance. And a lot of the engines that we saw in that time period, the Tiger Shark, the 2.4 liter Hyundai engine, things like that, the ones that was in the Outlander, et cetera, those were all related at a core level, but they had different horsepower ratings and some hybrid things here and different modules, like some were direct injection, some were not, et cetera.
Mhm.
But a lot of the core engineering work for geometry and efficiency and burn combustion technology, et cetera, was shared between these. So that way they could lower costs. And that's what seems to be going on here because their goal is to make small SUVs and sedans and things like that for these Central and Southern American markets that are much more cost conscious than the US at
Mhm.
even lower costs than they could do themselves. And I think I would like to see more of that in the US.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think there are going to be too many people who are competing. You know, I know, pick a car, right? But if you're looking, let's say Blazer and an Ionic 5, something like that, which really Equinox Ionic 5, how many people are really cross shopping those different vehicles? How many, you're
Mhm.
not looking for a very large SUV from Hyundai, you'll go over to Chevy and General Motors to get a Tahoe and a Suburban and trucks. Obviously, we don't see any big trucks in the Hyundai, Kia,
Mhm.
portfolios. There's just not a lot of overlap. So it doesn't seem like if they partnered up and said, okay, hey, we'll give you this SUV, we'll give you this crossover, you
Mhm.
this sedan, you this truck. I don't think it would hurt the brand image or anything, or really start stealing sales away from one another. If we start doing
Mhm.
badge engineering and now you start getting
Mhm.
just pick your module, then obviously that's going to start cutting into sales and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we see it with Toyota and Subaru on a lot of their EVs, and there's benefit to both companies to begin with,
Mhm.
and just like we see the prologue and the Blazer, you can
Mhm.
flip a coin and there you go. But it's good to see more
Yeah.
partnership coming together.
It'll be interesting to see if they can do it without losing identities in this
Mhm.
process. And I think that's some of the reason that car companies have resisted these kinds of types before. There are obviously some personality issues. It's seemingly easier for American car companies to team up for transmissions, say like Ford and GM have with transmission designs, than platforms. They don't really like that part. But a foreign competitor, that seems somehow a easier partnership. So we've seen GM and Toyota and Honda and Toyota partnerships in the past. We've seen, of course, Ford buy Mazda basically, and
Mhm.
other companies, and also have other arrangements with them, the Chrysler Group of companies and Mitsubishi historically, etc. That seems to be somehow more comfortable for some of these car companies to leverage these different strategies. But some of this seems to be sort of a market issue also internationally. This car company is good in this market, and that car company is smaller or wants help or whatever, but they're going to trade things. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I'm not sure what US application could really be helpful aside from, to be honest, more collaboration in the truck and larger SUV space, which seems like a something that they would never do.
Right. And yeah, I think that's where you would get the most benefit, at least something like Hyundai. But yeah,
Mhm.
I know why General Motors would bother, because then they are really helping create a competitor that they
Yeah.
already have a pretty sizable chunk of the market in.
And this brings me along to our sad news for the day, where the average transaction price of the new car is now up to $48,841 as of recent reporting here.
That just keeps climbing, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people misunderstand inflation, which is kind of funny. So even though inflation had largely returned to pre-pandemic levels, remember inflation is just the rate of change. So we're never going back. I
No,
don't
no,
know
no.
it. Yeah,
Inflation exists,
yeah,
period.
right.
Not
And
a
if we
theory, it's a law at this point. Yeah.
Exactly. And if our economy went into a state of deflation, then things would be real bad. So we don't
Mhm.
want that either. That's not good. But like basically we're not going to be returning to a point in time where the average new car transaction is going to be dramatically lower unless we see some severe changes in customer demand. We just don't see customers that are interested in cars that are below those price points. But Dodge is dropping some news though, and saying that they now have the least expensive SUV with a V8 engine in America in the 2026 Durango, and that means that the Durango is kicking on for 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, talking about self-driving vehicles, that's got its license, as long as it passed the test, but it's
Hmm.
got plenty of spunk, so it might have lost some points in speeding, because Jeep and Ram and Dodge, they've revitalized the world with the return of these V8s, and they are throwing them at everything. So
Hmm.
not
But
surprised
not
we're
just the
seeing that in the
V8s,
Durango.
because they're also saying that the Charger is going to be the least expensive way to get 500 plus horsepower.
It's still not going to be cheap.
No, no.
And actually, I haven't sat down with this one, so if I'm wrong, let me know. And I mostly mean commenters. You may not know off the top of your head. Just because it has 500 horsepower doesn't mean it's going to be the quickest vehicle for its price, because I think a lot of that competition still comes from EVs.
That's true. But for gasoline vehicles, where the people are in a different market segment, I would say, are not
Yeah,
considering the
for
EV,
sure, for sure.
the Charger inline six with 550 horsepower is going to be pretty darn quick.
A common,
The
yeah.
Durango, though, interesting. 44.5 is where it's going to start. So below the average new car transaction price, and the V6 is dead. Interestingly, well, we don't know about fleet customers. It may still exist for
I
police
would,
departments,
yeah,
etc.
probably.
But interestingly, on the retail side, Durango skewed very heavily towards V8s, not
Mhm.
V6s, and so that's part of this decision process. Every model is going to be able to tow 8,700 pounds, and they're bringing the 6.4-liter Hemi back with a twist. The 6.4 Hemi is no longer an SRT model, so you'll be able to get.
Okay.
In fact, the 392 SRT is dead, has been
Okay.
for a bit now. So
Yeah.
you'll be able to do a base GT. Then the next trim level up is going to have the 6.4, and then you're going to be able
Okay.
to get the 6.2 supercharged 700 horsepower model. That's still kicking around.
Right.
And then there's going to be a fantastically expensive, essentially custom paint job model of Durango, where you'll be able to choose between a whole boatload of different interior leather colors, an unlimited color palette for the exterior. So if you want a particularly atrocious shade of purple and garish seats and yellow seat belts and purple whatevers, you'll be able to do that for, I'm guessing, around 120 grand.
So you're telling me if you wanted to do the European car experience, the BMW, the Porsche, the fill in the blank, right? Where you get to do basically a paint to order, custom configuration. I want this piping and this stitching, and I want this
Well,
accent color and this dash material. But you
not
wanted
quite that far.
something like that, and you wanted to throw similar money to it, but you wanted a very different product at the end of the day. That's what you're telling me.
Yep. No stitching choices. They didn't say anything about the dashboard.
Sure.
It sounds like you'll
Sure.
be able to go leather or suede on some of these pieces, but yeah, it's
But
a
conceptually,
I
it's
am
your build to order, and we're
yeah.
doing this with the Dodge Durango.
hmm I don't know why we're not doing that with, I don't know, a Ram 1500, the top end
Hey,
one,
the
the tungsten,
tungsten premium or something, right?
or a Grand Cherokee. Where's the
Tungsten
Grand
custom.
Cherokee customization program?
Mm,
Wagoneer, where's the
Wagoneer
Wagoneer?
would.
Or I don't know,
Yeah,
just shooting from the hip here, Alpha, like with Alfa Romeo still there, or Maserati. They still own Maserati.
right.
Where's Levante's program?
Well, why not the Pacifica? I mean, listen, if you're going to talk about vehicles you're going to spend a lot of time in, and uh, how do I feel about this one? Really
If this
conflicted.
works.
Really conflicted because there's also a world where you could order your Dodge Durango at $45,000. And I think for, I don't know, 20 grand, you could go ahead and get it wrapped and probably get your seats refinished and probably get some seat belts replaced
Yep.
and still, but it's not from the factory and you don't get the sticker with it. And it's probably going to be missing a badge or two, but you can custom order badges.
I mean, it's not going to have
That's a
700 horsepower either, so there's
That's
that.
true. That's true. Yeah. Interesting.
I
As long as they don't call it
I
a final edition. So,
I am intrigued by the third row delete, but I have questions. If you
mm,
delete the third row, which I fully support, because then you get a
okay,
really big cargo area.
sure.
And I rented one of those once. I rented a Durango at some point thinking, oh, it's going to have 3 rows of seats. That'll be handy. Turns out, no, that rental Durango had the third row delete option.
Mhm.
And it has a huge storage bin under the floor where the third
Okay.
row would go. So you got, I mean,
Okay.
it's a lot of storage area. And then the spare's still under the butt.
Mhm.
Um, I'm wondering, is it a 4-seat Durango? Do they stick a
Hmm.
bench back in a 700 horsepower Durango, or do you like
No, that's a four seat.
I
I think that's a four
I
seat.
wanna
Yeah.
I wanna see that because 'cause I'm intrigued. Well, they didn't say, so that's why I'm no
Yeah,
spec
that's
sheet.
my that's my
Yeah.
guess, right? I
Yeah.
want to see at
Mhm,
that
mhm,
point. You might as well give me like the Lux package, like you can get in an LX, where
mhm,
you get
mhm.
the full executive rear seat
Yeah.
configuration.
I also want to see, full disclosure, this is someone that currently owns a Durango because it
Hmm.
tows well. So it tows 9,000 pounds fantastically.
Hmm.
Reason we have it. I want to see the
So does the
Durango
TX.
customer that is willing to pay $120,000 for a customized Durango. I want to see them. I
Hmm.
want to know where they live. I want to see the Durango they picked out,
Right.
and I want to know. I want to root around in their brain and go, why?
And what did they
Why
trade
have you
in?
done this?
And then the answer is probably their Hellcat Durango.
But why? At $120,000, you could have bought so many things that I would buy more than a Hellcat Durango.
Yeah, there are a lot there are a lot
I
of
mean,
things I would if I had
I mean,
120 grand, it would not can make the shopping list in any world
let's
I'd
see.
come into.
How much is an X7 Alpina? Yeah, if 152. If you are theoretically, again, we don't know pricing. If you're
Right.
theoretically Durangoing for 120 grand, you could have. There are
For
a whole
sure.
bunch of X7s you could have bought.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. If you didn't
Or
and you don't have to go full Alpina, you could have just done an X7M and,
yeah, I mean, you could have bought a lightly loved X5M and a minivan if you really needed the third row. I mean, there's so many other options that you could have
But somebody
done.
who's doing this is not looking for a used car, whether it's
Oh,
certified pre-owned or not.
in fact, especially with that rear seat delete, an X5M competition's 129.
Well, now that's a tough sell. I mean, you could get a custom Durango.
It's not 700 horsepower. It's only 617,
Yeah. So, is it any good, really, at
but
the
it's
end of
also
the
an
day?
X5M competition. Just
Hmm.
saying.
All right. So you like names, huh?
I'm just going,
I'm about experiences.
base Durango with that 5.7, that is a fantastic deal. If you're looking at an Explorer or a Pilot or whatever, and you're like, I have a boat and I want to tow. If
Mhm.
you really want to tow 5,000 pounds on a very regular basis every weekend, or you want to tow 7,000 pounds, Durango every day of the week, 5 days, 5 times on Sunday,
Which
right?
is why Alex has a Durango. Not that he hates
Right,
the Durango for everything else,
right,
but it's that.
right. But I'm saying
That's the use case. Yeah.
that's the fan. So I think the V8 made total sense. The fact that they put the higher tow rating on available on every engine makes total sense. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. That's what that thing is for. But if you don't, then I mean, I love a V8 Rumble. I guess that's the answer. So like great pricing and options choices there. We don't know how much the 6.4 is going to cost yet, but likely a lot less than it used to when you had to do the full on SRT to get it.
Right.
Also fantastic decision. $120,000 Durango SRT, not a
Theoretically
fantastic
120,000,
decision.
but yeah, we're in the ballpark. We got to be in the
That's
ballpark.
maybe have you gone to see your doctor? Like, are you experiencing hallucinations, early dementia
What if they
signals?
are a doctor? Now what?
A
Now what?
second opinion. Time for a second opinion. Have you recently been hit on the head?
Hmm.
So many questions there.
Did you get run over in the crosswalk by a Durango?
Yeah, seek help from a medical professional. Sort of like if your erection has lasted longer than a few hours, talking about
Hmm.
that $120,000
If
Durango,
you are doing anything on this
seek help.
configurator other than goofing around, please seek medical attention.
Yep. And with
So,
that, we will see you all next week.
adios.